Govinda Singh, 1984, Governor of 84 Arya, and I'm going to continue from where I left off. Now, we must not forget in World War I, during the war between the German-Prussian army of General Erich Ludendorff and Paul von Hindenburg, 100,000 German Jewish soldiers fought for Germany's army, fought for the German nation against the Russians in World War I, and 12,000 German Jewish soldiers died fighting for Germany's army against the Russians in World War I. So if I could have had any influence in World War I, if I was the influencer, as you could say, or if I had a voice that people would listen to, I would try to appeal to the German National Socialist Workers' Party, the neo-Nazis, that you must not harm the 100,000 German Jewish soldiers who support Germany in World War I. And I would appeal to the Jewish population in Germany, not just Germany, in Poland, in the Ukraine, that though the greedy bankers, the Weimar Republic bankers, have caved in and been bribed to accept stolen money from African India to no longer support the German army in World War I, the German civilians who have no power or influence in decision making during those times must continue supporting the German army 100% and not lose support for German army on the home front. And the German Jewish Socialist Association must continue to support the German army on the home front in World War I to repel the Russian purges into the Baltic and Balkan states. And if the German Jewish Socialist Associations, the Nuterai Carter, and the lovely Jewish who comes to mind when it comes to the Jewish community, the legendary scientists Carl Sagan, Noam Chomsky, and Bernie Sanders, the lovely, kind, benevolent Jews, the very kind-hearted Jews, if they were to come into harm's way in the 1940s or 1930s in Germany, I'd be very saddened, because I think they're very lovely human beings. But who would have? But there's if they did come into harm's way, it's because their identity as Jewish community has been endangered. So who's endangering their identity? Well, that's Zionist England and Zionist America for getting the Weimar Republic to accept the stolen booty, war booty, and the stolen loot that they've looted from India and Africa, and to start calling for the German population to no longer support the German army on the home front in World War I. And you have to always ask the question of why, when Lenin from Russia signed a treaty to resign and withdraw Russia from combat on the Eastern Front, that's practically a victory for the German-Prussian army. And so you thought that the German population would continue supporting the German army. So to suddenly stop and say we can't support this war, something's very dodgy, something very sketchy, why they suddenly stop supporting the German army on the home front. So that's basically that's just a summary of what was going on in World War I, World War II in the Baltic and Balkan states. So after the Russian purge in 1932, and then the Jews got expelled from Germany in 1933 because they were blamed for the Holodomor famine in the Ukraine, Germany lost on the World War II because the millions of Chinese and from Hong Kong and China and the Indian soldiers, the African soldiers who deployed on the Western to attack the Western Front, the Third Reich eventually collapsed. And so when they collapsed, Germany was divided. They had the Allied Zionists who took control of West Berlin, and then you had the Soviet who controlled East Berlin. During the times when Eastern Europe was cut off from Western Europe, it was a very terrible nightmare time. The Stalinists did some very disgusting things to the Eastern Europeans, and but there was opposition after Stalin died by a minister from Russia called Nikita Khrushchev. Now, Nikita Khrushchev released a secret speech where he denounced Stalin as a dictator, and he called Stalin a war criminal, and that's very true. Stalin was a war criminal before World War I in regards to the Holodomor famine in 1932, and Stalin was a war criminal after World War II. He was a war criminal before World War II because of the famine in the Ukraine, and he was a war criminal after World War II because of what his nasty policies were after the Reich collapsed in 1944. Stalin's a nasty piece of work. But there was Nikita Khrushchev from Russia. He's not perfect, he's far from perfect, but it's a start for a Russian minister within the Russian territories to speak out against such a nasty bastard like Stalin. So that's who you could say the Eastern Europeans and the Baltic and Balkan states would like to reach out to and work with, is ministers like Nikita Khrushchev to de-Stalinize the de-Stalinization of Russia. Now, the thing I want to get back to is Alexander Kerensky in 1917, who overthrew the royalists, who overthrew and executed the royal family of Russia. He called for Russian democracy. Now, initially in World War I, he was fighting against the German-Prussian army of Erich Ludendorff and Paul von Hindenburg. But after he overthrew the Tsars, if the Bolsheviks were going to seize power from the Russian provisional government due to the fragile times, it would have been better for Alexander Kerensky to deflect in World War I and support General Erich Ludendorff and support General Paul von Hindenburg to repel the Bolsheviks and prevent the Bolsheviks from seizing power in Russia, because they were very unpopular because they didn't do it by democratic means. Now, people may say, well, the Russian provisional government overthrew the Tsars, that wasn't very democratic, but the Tsars weren't democratic themselves. So the Russian provisional government overthrew the Tsars so they can establish a democracy. But what the Bolsheviks did, they just seized power from the Russian provisional government and implemented a war communism where people were violated in very disgusting ways. So, and then the Bolsheviks supported the Communist Party of China, who then seized power from the Kuomintang in China, in Beijing. So it's all connected into what's going on in Asia. So that's, I had to cover World War I and World War II to now look at what the dilemma is in the Ukraine. Putin's been smoking crack. That's what's basically going on. Something's wrong with him. I don't know what the fuck he thinks he's playing at, but it's really, you look at the crisis of what's going on in the Ukraine at this current situation in 2022, and you would think the Balkan states, Ukraine, Poland, Eastern Europe in general has been through a lot. So to recreate their suffering, rather than hear the merits of the case based on the merits of the case alone, and think the Ukraine, the Baltic states and Eastern Europe has been put through enough by the iron hands such as the Stalinists, you wouldn't want to recreate their suffering, but he's gone ahead and recreated their suffering, because that means he's a nasty Stalinist bastard. It's very tragic. Now, we've seen how coloured people, Indian students and African students, have been mistreated by the right-wing racist Ukrainians and Polish in the Eastern Europe, and so there's many people in multicultural part of Western Europe who say, fuck them, I don't give a shit how many of them die. My feelings are, my sympathies towards those who are not racist. There are some lovely left-wing Eastern Europeans that are work colleagues here in Great Britain, in Britain, and not all Eastern Europeans are racist. That's what I want to stress. So I'm thinking about our left-wing anti-racist Eastern European work colleagues who could possibly, their lives could be turned upside down in a split second. And this vlog is trying to find a solution to, I'll break it down. I'll probably have to do another vlog after this because I have only 3 minutes left. The Fourth Reich, that will be my next vlog.